Friends, I'm very excited that you're joining me again today, and this time we're going to have a look at Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. And this story is one of my favorite stories at the beginning of Mark's Gospel. So turn the Bibles to Mark chapter 4, or otherwise listen along as I read the Bible in English. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus told them, "Let's cross over to the other side of the sea." So they left the crowd and took him along, since he was already in the boat. And other boats were with him as well. A fierce windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking over the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped with water. But he was in the stern, sleeping on the cushion. So they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to die?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Silence, be still." The wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Then he said to them, "Why are you fearful? Do you still have no faith?" And they were terrified and asked one another, "Who then is this? Even the wind and the sea obey him." Now, friends, this is a beautiful story which really clearly shows us who Jesus is. Now remember, in Mark chapter 1 verse 1, Mark, the writer of this gospel, he says that he thinks that Jesus is the Son of God. And so when we read this, we are meant to think, is Jesus the Son of God? Do we agree with Mark? And as we read this story, we see some miraculous things, some amazing things that are happening, which make it seem like Jesus has that sort of power that God has. You see, he's going across to the other side of the lake, to the other side of the sea, And as he's going to the other side of the sea, the big storm arises, and it looks like they're going to die. And this is important because remember, his close friends on the boat with him, a lot of them were fishermen, which means that they spent a lot of their lives on the sea. They knew the wind and the waves. They were not people who would get scared easily by the wind and the waves. So if the fishermen are scared, it must have been a big storm. And they are so scared that they run to Jesus, who's sleeping under the boat, and they say to him, "Don't you care that we are going to die?" And Jesus, he gets up and he says to the sea, "Be still." Now this is very, very amazing. It's hard for us to sometimes understand, but imagine that there is a storm outside. And you can see the storm outside, and you don't like the rain, so you want the rain to stop. And so imagine you go out onto your balcony or outside onto the street, and you look up in the sky and you scream, "Be still, stop." What do you think will happen? You see, for us humans, there is no way that we scream at nature and that nature just listens. But Jesus, he says to the sea, "Be still." And everything becomes calm. Even nature listens to this man Jesus. And if we think about it, who is powerful enough to control nature? I mean, surely that's God. God who created everything. God who controls nature. God is the only one who can tell the sea to calm down, for the sea to listen. And Jesus he then turns to his friends on the boat, who were very scared and thought that they were going to die. And he says to them, "Why were you so fearful? Do you still not have faith?" Now this word faith is very important. Remember, faith, it means trust. To have faith means to trust in someone. And here, Jesus is saying, do you still not trust in me? Do you still not have faith in me? Do you still not trust that I am the Son of God, that I am powerful to be able to keep you safe? Jesus is asking this question because it's very important for us. We need to know that Jesus is the Son of God. We need to know that Jesus is powerful. We need to know that Jesus can keep us safe. Because you see, Jesus isn't just the one that saves the disciples from the sea. Jesus is the one that ultimately saves us from death, saves us from sin that leads to death. And so you see, in the end, what the people ask is the same thing that we need to ask. See, the people at the end, after he says, do you still have no faith? They say, well, they were very terrified, they were scared, and they said to one another, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Who is this man? Who is Jesus? Who is this man who can even have the wind and the waves listen to them? Surely this man is the Son of God. What do we learn then? What do we learn about who Jesus is? Well, we learn that Jesus has the power of God to control nature, to control the sea, to control the wind and the waves. We learn that Jesus is the one who we need to trust to keep us safe. Jesus asked that questions of his friends. He says, do you still have no faith? Do you still not trust? Jesus is the one we need to trust to keep us safe. And finally, we learn that Jesus does care. The friends of his, they run to him and they say, do you not care that we are going to die in this storm? And Jesus gets up and he stops the storm. Jesus cares for us. He cares for us so much that he will save us even from death itself. And what we are to do is we are to trust him. We are to have faith in him. That means we are to follow him, knowing that he is the one who can save us. We can't save ourselves. We can't control the sea. We can't control death. But Jesus is the Son of God. With the very power of God, he can control the sea, the wind, and the waves, and he can forgive sins. And that means he can save us from death and separation from God.